Hello everybody, and welcome back to another Minecraft modding tutorial for version 1.19. In this tutorial we are going to be doing fluids. So I planned to do this video a few weeks ago, but I'm going to be honest with you guys, I haven't been bothered to do this video. I've been trying to write a good system where fluids are a bit easier, because fluids by default is just a lot of mess and it's all over the place. So I have spent the past few days, maybe up to a week, trying to write a good system just to get this to fit nicely into a tutorial. So I do apologize for that gap in tutorials. Hopefully they should be back to a schedule now. Unfortunately I can't promise anything because university, but I'm going to try my best. So let's just get started with the tutorial. So the first thing, as usual with everything we do, we're going to want a new init, and this will be a FluidInit. Okay, and inside of here we're actually going to want two deferred registers. So we're going to want a public static final deferred register, and this will be of fluid type, and we'll call this fluid types, and that is equal to the usual deferred register dot create, and that will be forge registries dot fluid types. And actually, no, that's not what we need to do, my bad. This needs to be keys.fluidTypes. So forgeregistries.keys.fluidTypes. Okay, and then we need to also give it our mod ID, so tutorialmod.modID. Okay, and then we need our second deferred register, so this will be a public static final deferred register, and this will be of type fluid, and we're just going to call this one fluids is equal to deferred register dot create forge registries dot fluids, and once again our mod ID. Fantastic, and just make sure you import everything correctly there. Okay, now from here you're actually going to need to want to copy a class which I have made, and this is called the FluidRegistryContainer. So I'm going to come into base here, and I'm going to create a FluidRegistryContainer. Okay, and then I'm just going to paste this in. So we're actually going to need to go ahead and resolve all of these imports. Now, I'm sure there is a better way of doing this. Maybe like, nope. Either way, we can just go through and import all of these. There shouldn't actually be that many different things. And after that, we'll briefly go through some of the stuff that's going on here. So I'm just going to slowly go through and import these. All of this code right here in this class will be linked in the description of this video. So if you want to use the way that I do it in this tutorial, then you're going to need this code. However, you don't need to use this code to use fluids. I have just made this to simplify the whole process for everyone. So we're just going to go through and import everything. And you know, I'll be back with you once I've imported all of this. Okay, and there we go. So I have just imported all of that. And we'll try and briefly go through this, but we'll go through it by actually trying to register our fluid. So let's come back into our FluidInit. And what we need to do is we need to create a public static final FluidRegistryContainer, and I'm just going to call this example underscore fluid for us, but you can name it whatever you want, of course. And this will just be equal to a new Fluid Registry container, and here is where we're going to need to go ahead and pass some information. So the first will need to be the registry name of your fluid. Now this will also be used for the bucket, so I'm just going to call it example underscore fluid to keep it simple. The underscore fluid is up to you whether you add that. I just like to do that, otherwise it can possibly do some weird stuff. And then we need to provide a fluid type properties, and these are the properties that will define how this fluid will how it will act, if you will. So to do that, we do fluid type dot properties dot create, and then we can just specify any of these properties that we wish our fluid to have. So you can set the viscosity, the temperature, things like whether or not you can swim in it, whether or not you can drown in it, things like that basically. So I'm going to say can swim, and I'm going to set that to true, and I'm going to set can drown to true, and can push entity to true, and I'm also going to do something like support boating and set that to true. Now once you've done all of the properties you would like, you can move on to the next argument, and this will be a supplier of a client extensions. So the way we do this is we do, and this is my custom code that I have made to do this, so a supplier of Fluid Registry Container dot create extension, and in here we can provide a new client extensions, and this will first require your mod ID. So test mod, this is not test mod, this is tutorial mod. And then we need to just supply once again the name of our fluid. So mine is example underscore fluid. And then you can specify any properties that you wish. Now by default, the flowing texture, the overlay texture, the still texture, and the render overlay texture will be set using your mod ID and your name here. However, if you would wish to have them at a different location, you could do, for example, still, and then you can supply a different name, so blah blah blah, and you can also have the option of supplying a different folder. By default, the folder is blocks. However, you could, if you wanted to, set the folder to fluids. So that is something you can do. Additionally, you can remove the render overlay. So the render overlay essentially is what overlays on your screen when you're inside of the fluid. I don't think lava has this, but water does have this overlay. If you don't want that, you can just do render overlay null, and that will just remove that. And other than that, there are a few other properties. So for example, you can set the fog color for when you are inside the fluid. And you can also set a tint. So this can be a color, or it can just be a try function, which allows you to supply different things. So for example, we'll do state level pos, and depending on these three factors, you could do a particular color. So for example, I don't know, pos.x is greater than 50, then return white or return black. I don't know. You could do something like that. But you can also just supply a solid integer, or you don't have to give it a tint at all. I'm going to give it a integer, and obviously this can be hexadecimal or it can be decimal, but obviously hexadecimal is preferred. I'll just give it a tint of this, which is a nice pink color. Everyone likes pink. And I'm also going to give it a fog color to demonstrate that to you. So you know, we could give it whatever color we want, really. Something like one for the red. You could say maybe 0.2 for the green and 0.5 for the blue. I don't know, whatever you want, of course. And after you've done that, we can move on to the final parameter. Not the final parameter, I lied. We have two more parameters. So we first have the block properties. However, you can also supply some additional properties here. So to do that, we can do a new additional properties. And this is also a builder. So this allows us to supply things like how much it should decrease per block, the explosion resistance of the fluid, the slope find distance, so how long it will go until to find a slope, essentially, and also the tick rate. So those are things you can define there if you want. If not, then you can just remove that. So I'm not going to actually be using that. I think that's perfectly fine. And instead, we're going to define some block behavior. So this is just to register our fluid as a block, since fluids are blocks after all. And to make our behavior, we can just do block behavior dot properties and just define your properties. I'm gonna just simply copy blocks.water because we shouldn't really need anything different than that. And then we can also go ahead and define the item properties, and this will be for the bucket. So we can do a new item.properties, and I'm just going to give it our tab. So tutorial mod.tab, and I'm also going to say that it stacks to a size of 1. And then we can just go ahead and format all of this, just make it a little bit easier to read would be lovely. So we'll just plonk pretty much all of this down on its own lines, just to give it some nice readability. So we can just do that on its own line, that on its own line, that on its own line, and then just that, and finally down there. Fantastic. So I'll just move this to there as well. There we go, that's a little bit nicer to read. Actually, we'll put it there. Okay, so that is your properties that essentially you can define here. I'm actually going to pull that up there. There we go. So that defines our fluid. Now, all of that this requires actually is that you have a BlockInit class. So essentially, if you go into your Fluid Container Registry, you'll see that it references FluidInit.FluidTypes, it references FluidInit.Fluids, and it references BlockInit.Blocks and ItemInit.Items. So if yours are different, all you need to come to do all you need to do is come into this class and change these values around. So for example, say you called your FluidInit beans in it. I don't know why you would call it that, but let's just say you did that. Then you just change this to beans init. And maybe if you change the variable as well, you might also call that beans. I don't know why you would do that, but maybe you would. Same with your BlockInit and ItemInit. Sometimes people like to call their stuff things like mod items, in which case, fair enough, all you need to do is call it mod items. The other important thing, of course, is that these deferred registers are public, and that means they can just be accessed. Also static, very important as well. The alternative obviously is you can go ahead and pass these inits into your constructor. That's you can do that if you want. The great thing about this class that I like is you can just change whatever you want since you have access to it. We'll briefly just go ahead and run through what's going on here so we can explain it a little bit better. So the first thing we go ahead and do is we just set this type. Now the type is a registry object of fluid type, so this is actually what's registered to this deferred register right here, and this type is just equal to the registry as you normally would register something, a new fluid type, and that just takes in the properties, which is the second parameter that you pass in. And in here we just actually create an anonymous inner class, and this will essentially initialize the client, and that is what is used to define the still texture, flowing texture, overlay, fog color, tint, etc, etc. And these are all defined in here. So that just accepts a client extensions, which is the third parameter that we give, which is our supplier of client fluid type extensions. So if you come into here, you'll see we did this supplier here, and we use FluidRegistryContainer.create extension. If you come and look at this, this just takes in a client extensions, which has a bunch of just builder methods for your different extensions. And you'll see when that's passed into here, all it does is override all these methods and returns it with the extension fields. It's fairly simple stuff. It may look a little bit more complicated because there is a fair amount of code here, but it's not actually as much as it looks. Beyond that, you also have the source being registered, fairly simple, the flowing being registered, and those are using the properties, which are the block behavior no, they're not, they're the fluid type properties, which are set actually here. So this is actually something that's a little bit confusing. I won't go into too much detail, but essentially we actually have to register the properties after the blocks, because the properties require the blocks. It's a really weird system, but how it works is that you have to register the blocks. So this, basically what I'm trying to say is this is why I've made this a class, because otherwise it's really messy, and I think this is the most streamlined way to register your fluids. Now I must say, if you want to go ahead and get access to your fluid, right, then you're going to need to just do we'll just create a fake method for this, so private void test, and we can say FluidInit.example fluid, and all you need to do to get your fluid is just do .source, and .get will just get you the source fluid, and you can also obviously do flowing, gets you the flowing fluid. You can do the block, which will get you the actual fluid block, or liquid block as it is called, and you can also do the bucket to get you the bucket item. And those are all registry objects, by the way. Additionally, you can get the fluid type if you ever need that, and you can get the type properties. If you need the actual fluid properties, then you can do get properties, and that's just because it's slightly different. You'll see properties is the only not final one, so we make it private. But yeah, that's pretty much all we need. So let's just clean up some imports and come into our main class. So all we need to do in our main class is do FluidInit.FluidTypes.registerBus, and we also need to do FluidInit.Fluids.registerBus. It's important to note that if you didn't previously have an item in it and a block in it, you also need to go ahead and make those and register them to the bus in here as well. Other than that, all we have is the JSONs. So the JSONs are a little bit complicated, but we'll go through them and hopefully they shouldn't be too bad. So first of all, we're going to start with a block state, and that will be our fluid blocks block state. So I'm just going to come into here, create a new file, example underscore fluid.json. And all you need to do, this is just a basic fluid. I'm just going to copy this in and change the values around. So tutorial mod example fluid. Nothing too complicated. This is just your normal general old block state. After your block state, we can go ahead and just do the lang. Oops, I didn't mean to close that. So let's just do the lang as usual. So all we need to do in the lang is just do our bucket. So item.tutorial mod dot example underscore fluid underscore bucket, and we can just say bucket of example, for example, get it? Anyways, then we can go ahead and do the block model as well. So still have a BB model in here, interesting. So for the block model, actually, we don't really have anything special. It's just a normal block model and it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to copy example block, and all we need to do is change it to example fluid and change this to example fluid. Not that it really matters. Okay, then we can go ahead and do the item model. Now we only need to do the item model for the bucket. So in that scenario, we can do example underscore fluid underscore bucket.json. Now this will be a slightly different item model to maybe what you're used to. So we first need to specify the parent, as you usually do, but this will be forge :item / bucket, since we're going to use the forge bucket model. And to do that, we have to also specify a special loader that will be used for this model. So we'll use forge :bucket. Then we define the textures, and to do that, it will be base. And for the base, that would just be item / bucket. That would just use the normal Minecraft bucket item. If you want to use your own bucket item, then you can just specify your location of the bucket. So for example, tutorial mod :items / custom bucket, or whatever your bucket would be. We'll go back to item / bucket though. And then we also need to specify the fluid, which is going to be a custom texture that we're going to need. So that will be tutorial mod :items / drip underscore bucket. And that's just going to be a texture which I'll show you in a minute. And then we also need to come out of the textures and still specify the fluid once again. And this will just be tutorial mod : and then the name of your fluid. So example underscore fluid was ours. Fantastic. So beyond there, we do have the textures, and this is where things get a little bit complicated. So let's first go over this drip bucket. So I'm going to copy this in, and I will show you it once I've copied it in. So let's open textures items. Just going to copy that in. No, I want to copy, not move, please. Thank you. And if you view this, you see it is a really weird drip texture. This will be once again linked in the description. Actually, it won't. It will be in my GitHub, which is also linked in the description. It's not really any different. So that is the drip bucket, and that is the texture that we need to have, and that will be used for this right here. And then also we need to create the fluid textures. So fluid textures are a little weird, and I am going to just copy them across. I'm not really going to explain how fluid textures work. I feel like that's a little bit out of the scope of a modding tutorial. That's more for maybe a texture pack tutorial. So I'm not going to go ahead and do those. Instead, I will just copy them across, and I just need to go ahead and rename them all to be example underscore fluid. And I'm just going to do these, refactor, rename, example fluid, and I'm just going to go through all of these and do those really quickly. Okay, so I've just renamed all of those. Let's quickly just go through them and discuss what each one is. So we first have the plain example fluid, and this actually, I don't know what this is for. I think this is for the block, but it doesn't really matter. I don't think what this actually looks like, as long as it's just a normal texture, really. Then we have the flowing texture. I'm just using water. Okay, I'm lazy. Don't at me. So we have the flowing texture, fairly simple. Mine's grayscale, so that I can tint it a little bit easier, but it's obviously up to you. Then I have just the MC meta because it has an animation, and then I have the overlay texture. So this is what will be put in front of your face when you're inside the fluid. And then we have the still texture, once again just water, and then the still texture MC meta as well. So beyond that, we can actually just go ahead and do the fancy thing of running the game. Okay, and here we are in the game. So if we go into our creative tab, we see the bucket, and it has the correct model. Fantastic. And if we place it down, boom, we have a fluid. And the great thing is we can move in it, and if we go inside of it, which might be a little bit trickier than expected, it's quite strong, this fluid. So you'll see there is an overlay texture on the screen. It's quite hard to see, but it is there. And there is also a beautiful pink fog color, because that's what we set the fog color to. And also it's tinted because we set a tint. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We should also be able to boat on it, so let's just test that, I suppose. So if we go search and we go boat, and if we place down a boat, we should be able... Oh, no, hang on. Okay, there you go. Yeah, we can boat on it. Fantastic. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this tutorial. Hopefully in the next tutorial we'll be covering entities, maybe, or block entities. I'm not sure which is more highly requested, so I've still got to determine that, but hopefully entities, we'll see. So yeah, I hope you guys did find this tutorial useful. If you did, please do be sure to smash your face into that like button with a parrot, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Goodbye.